Welcome everyone! For the ones of you who don't know me, my name is Zucconi. I'm a lecturer in artificial intelligence and a science communicator. And if this is the first time you're watching, welcome to Gamedev Graveyard. This is the weekly show where we talk about games, prototypes, postmortems, and everything that is somehow related to the world of game development, I guess. And as always, we will have a guest tonight. And if you have any question, feel free to leave it in the chat. I can never get it right. And hopefully we'll be able to address all of them. Now, today is going to be a fairly relaxed job, I hope. So if you just want to spend 1 hour where we just talks about games, I think this could be the perfect place. And with that being said, let's start by saying all the people in the chat. So hi Ahmed, hi Dan, hi Tim, hi Fede. As always, feel free to leave comments. And if there is any problem with the audio or anything that is not working, just let us know and we can fix it live, hopefully. Now, today we're going to have a guest that I've been knowing for quite a long time. Probably one of the first people I've met when I started working as an indie game developer here in London. And it's Holly Pickering. Now, she's a narrative designer and writer and an art director. She has worked on quite a number of titles, including Surgeon Simulator 2, and of course I'm really excited to talk about that, as much as we could say, you know. And she also worked on the Bradwell Conspiracy, either one. She also have done some work for the Lego franchise and a few other things that hopefully we will be able to discuss tonight. Now, with that being said, let me introduce you to Holly. Hi Holly, how are you doing?
Hi, how you doing?
Oh, it's a terrible day, but hopefully we can do it.
It's a terrible day. What? It's been a great day.
Lucky you.
I learned about scriptable objects today, so, you know, that was fun.
Then it's a bad day. It is indeed a bad day.
No, it's a great day. It's good. Honestly, it's fine.
So, do you want to introduce yourself to the viewers?
I mean, I think you covered a lot of it. My background is in art, specifically kind of like 3D art. I've done a couple of different roles within that. And then I did art direction on the Bradwell Conspiracy. But I'd been wanting to move more into like narrative design stuff because I kind of believe that narrative design kind of touches everything in a game. So generally, that's kind of where I've ended up focusing a lot of my time and effort the past few years. So yeah, that's where I am right now. But yeah, so just worked on a bunch of stuff currently, doing a bit of freelance and just working on my own stuff as well, really.
Hopefully we'll have a chance to cover some of that as well. So yeah, I know that a lot of people are here tonight because they've you know, the clickbait work. Having Surgeon Simulator 2 flashing on the title probably attracted quite a few people. So I think that, you know, clickbait is fun, but I always wanted to get it done as quickly as possible. I mean, as soon as possible, probably. So yeah. Do you want to talk a bit about Surgeon Simulator 2 and what you have been doing on that game?
Yeah, so I was working on that predominantly last year. I was there for kind of like a contract position. So I was there for, I think, 9 months in the end. And yeah, it was kind of just obviously, Surgeon Simulator 1 is quite a different game to what the sequel's going to be. So there was a lot of world building that was done for that game that very much fits in with what, you know, makes sense for that game. Like, it was kind of dark and it had this kind of slightly sinister undertone to it, which works for a single player game that's largely focused on kind of performance, because that's a huge part of that franchise, right? Is that being able to like perform as a, you know, with streamers and stuff, is a big thing to be able to perform as that role. So when it was looking at, well, how do we take this single player game and build something that's kind of world space, that is where you have full, you know, bodied characters, like who are those people? what is the place that they are in, because like another big part of this sequel is the fact that it's a UGC game, so where you players can like build their own levels in the editor, and that's the whole sequence, that's the whole system that the developers themselves have been using to build levels. So those levels can be obviously surgery based, but they can also be kind of like anything else that you can think of. So we wanted a world where you could like expand out beyond just surgery. So they wanted someone who could just focus on like, what's the world, like what makes sense for the gameplay systems that we have, and and then who are these characters. So that's a lot of like what I did, and kind of how we encourage positive gameplay within a space which could come across as being either dark or malicious in some way when you're thinking about surgery and pulling limbs off of people and all that kind of stuff. So we wanted to still do all that gameplay, but make it seem much more positive and silly than maybe it had been in the past. So that's what I was working on, really.
It's quite interesting also the fact that you're saying that Surgeon Simulator 1, the original one, is dark, and he has this sort of dark undertone, and I see limbs flying around in the video. So I was like, okay, then I don't know what's happening.
It's kind of like this really like madcap thing going on, and just kind of like the idea that you're like like this whole thing where you've now got a whole arm, you've like got the ability to like throw stuff much more than you did before, and then that becomes like part of the gameplay, and then you're like, cool, well, how can we like stretch that out and make sure that's all part of like the campaign, and like we're teaching you all of these new ways that you can interact and make it not only like make sense within like the teaching of the game, but then also like that it feels like it's within the context of how you're learning it, if you know what I mean.
I find it quite interesting, the fact that the original Surgeon Simulator basically, was made, a bit in a rush. It was a game jam game, if I remember correctly. So, you can see a lot of that coming into the design aspects of the game, obviously.
Yeah.
But also, there was a lot, like, there wasn't a direct telegraphed, I think, narrative element to it, but a lot of the stuff was happening in the background. So people were actually looking at elements in the background and thinking, oh, I have the theory because I've seen this object, or this is happening in the game, there is this level, so I assume that's what's going on. And I think this has created sorry, it's hard to talk while I see limbs flying off in the background.
I'm just like watching this thing, and I'm just like, oh my god, all these limbs, it's brilliant.
There's like a heart dispenser where I've seen hearts dropping. So it's a bit hard. I'm easily distracted.
The most distracting video to have in the back shot. Sorry,
I have to look somewhere else. But yeah, so there was, in a way, an aspect of environmental storytelling, let's say, whether that was intentional, whether that was, just there to create some, pretend there was some mystery. So how did you approach something like that for the narrative aspect of Surgeon Simulator? How do you take something that was so mysterious and work on the narrative aspects of it?
Yeah, I think... so I obviously chatted with Luke a lot, who is the original designer on Surgeon 1, and also I Am Bread, because I'm not sure if everyone realizes this, but they are like two parts of a whole in terms of like the Bossiverse, which is like what it's known internally as, which is where like I Am Bread is a prequel to Surgeon Simulator, because the guy who crashes the car at the end of I Am Bread is Bob, and that because there's a hand that comes through the window of like the crashed car, and that's like Nigel's hand. So these two games kind of like fit together, and then obviously there's all the stuff with like kind of the kind of DLC sort of stuff that came along afterwards with like the aliens and things, and that all kind of like ties in and had like codes written on stuff. And there were lots of design decisions that they purposefully made to make it feel like Nigel was this kind of like unreliable narrator in some way, or like the gameplay was somehow both real and not real, because like, is he having delusions? Is he a real doctor? Like all of this sort of stuff. And so, yeah, it created a lot of kind of fan theory around it. But there was also then loads of marketing materials that were produced, which also kind of like lean into this side, which is like a lot of that can, if you go and find it, is like quite dark. And like, you know, it was stuff where I was like, okay, we can like, you know, include some of these ideas, but also does it align with the product goals of the new game? And sometimes the answers to those was no. So like we had a lot of discussions, and like Luke was really actually a huge part of like the discussions about like what we wanted to do with the new world. And we kind of like, we ended up kind of thinking of like this version of Bernardshire for Surgeon 2 as almost like its own pocket universe that like maybe Venn diagrams slightly with the old one. I'm not quite sure how this ended up shipping, because obviously I haven't worked on the game for a really long time at this point, because I finished on it in like November. But as I left it, it was kind of this like, it's a pocket verse of its own version, but still very much influenced by the original. And yeah, I don't know how that's been left, but you know, we got to have Bob again, which was like the main thing we were all very excited about.
So,
and he plays a much bigger part this time, of what I've been told.
Oh God, I'm not sure if that's good for him or not. But, well, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, it has a whole so it has a whole campaign like this time that is that has at least a bit more story elements to it. So that's been like a big thing that the team has been excited about in terms of like development, because you know, it's not then just like about mechanics for mechanics' sake. It's kind of like mechanics that go along a kind of like a goal path or something. And it's not just kind of like you do it because you have to, you do it because it also like ties in with this bigger world. And then that also then helps with like the idea that you are in fact characters within this world, as opposed to just like this floating hand that in the end got called Nigel, you know?
So you actually mentioned the marketing aspects of Surgeon Simulator. And this is something that really fascinates me, because I remember that maybe it was EGX, maybe, I don't know, maybe it was Rezzed, I don't remember. There was this event where they... Is
it the like ambulance?
Yes. So for the ones of you who haven't seen it, basically boss arrived with an ambulance, a real, well, I don't know if it was real, but
it was a real one. It was just from like the 70s or something. That's what I was told at the time.
So it was a real ambulance, or it reasonably looked like one, and it was insane. It was just outside, and I was also given a syringe, a pen that was actually a syringe filled with blood.
Yes, yeah.
And the dark thing about it is that I was in love with that. It was like the bossa paraphernalia. I have a sort of like shrine of all the the game dev stuff that I collected over the events. And the pen starts leaking.
Oh no.
And it wasn't even red at that. It sort of separated into this like serum. And so this box was completely filled with this sticky yellowy stuff. So I was like, okay, maybe no. Maybe it was real blood.
I'm not into that.
We'll never know.
I love a good bit of merch myself, but I'm generally like, I would like a nice quality t-shirt. We did the best thing on Bradwell, it turned out. We went to EGX, I guess like 2 years ago. I'm trying to remember when even what is time at this point? I mean, really. But we went to EGX and we gave away like free bottles of water that had the thing on, and that was very popular. So can recommend to other game developers, just put your logo on a bottle of water, give it out. They'll be very popular.
That's actually quite clever. Like, if you remember, I used to give biscuits to players, and this is how I got them to play games that they wouldn't have otherwise play. Like, you want to play? Do you want a biscuits? Play the game.
Would you like a biscuit?
Probably.
A bit of bribery never hurt anyone, and I think with food and beverages that works quite well.
Did you know that I had two different type of biscuits? One for like people, common people, and one for like journalists. So based on how important.
Oh my god! Not all biscuits were made equal. So what's happening?
Like, you had like Tesco digestive biscuits, or you had like Mark and Spencer, like
Oh, taste the difference.
chocolate
Finest,
something like that.
double chocolate dipped in gold, delicious. I wouldn't mind one of those right now. Actually, that would be great.
And it always worked.
We weren't talking about video games at some point.
I'm so hungry right now.
I'm sorry, it's my fault.
So, one question about Surgeon Simulator is,
yes,
you work on the game, right? So the question is, are you good at Surgeon Simulator?
Okay, so I'm quite good at the first one.
Shock.
The funny thing about I'm okay at this one. And we did actually have like a game jam at one point. So I actually got to make a level for once. Because I'd literally all of my stuff is usually quite it's a lot of meetings, and it's quite, I was gonna say like theoretical. It's kind of like just a lot of documents, and I'm like, here's reasons to do these things. Here's a bunch of options that this could be. And I kind of like have like a world Bible I'm updating all the time. So I'm not very much like in engine or anything for that kind of work. So it was fun to be able to like go in the engine and build my own level. And I did like a nice little choose your own adventure level, which I'm hoping when the game comes out, I'm going to like remake, because it was like it was in like a really rubbish haunted house. Was like the idea. So like you'd walk over some like buttons and it would make lights, turn on and off, because basically the whole system just works with like signals being sent out to various things. So you can kind of link up anything to anything. So yeah, so it was like, and on the wall it had a bit of text that was being like, and there was thunder and lightning, and then in between a wall I had some like, I don't know, platforms going up and down that just had some planks on them, which then made some like clapping sort of noises. And I was like, yeah, it's really rubbish thunder and lightning. It's very good.
So I think you said the word that like got my attention. So does this mean that Surgeon Simulator 2 is Turing complete? Does it mean that I can actually build a computer inside it? I will do it.
I reckon that's probably possible.
I will do it.
I don't know if I could do it. But that's a challenge to all those people out there who know how to do such things.
Give me a pre-release
probably
copy.
Try.
And I will stop working, and for the next 3 weeks that will be my life.
A goes to B.
So I built one in Infinifactory, and I recently started Minecraft, so I can't promise I won't make one in Minecraft.
just a small project,
just a
then.
Small one,
Just a light hobby.
So there's another thing that I noticed from the trailer and from the gameplay video that I'm showing now. Beside the fact that there's limbs flying everywhere, I see that the player character, I don't know how customizable they are, but I can see that they look quite diverse in terms of like ethical background. You can see black characters, Asian characters, white characters. Do you know what was the idea behind it? Was it always the case?
Yeah, so actually that was one of the reasons why I was brought in, because so Bradwell was very much focused on having a really diverse like cast to it, even though there aren't that many voice characters. It was really important to me that all the character stories that you get kind of in the background are not all just people who sound like they are like white British people. That was really important to me. So we like made sure like in all those background characters that we had like a big range of people, just to kind of like reflect the type of place that London is, but also kind of like in that particular instance, like that tech is, right? That you can that like it should be a place that should be like open to everyone. And at the moment it's kind of not, but like that's the goal. So I was like, if you want the world to be a certain way, you can build your worlds to like be inclusive. And that's really what we wanted for this as well, was that we didn't want this to just be a game where it was like a bunch of white characters. And also just kind of not always just relying on tropes of like of characters as well based on like ethnicity or anything like that. So that was like a really important part of what we were doing. And then we had like a really interesting character workflow actually, where it was like me doing just some like really low level kind of character descriptions for concepts that were produced, and like large amounts of faces were first produced by one of the artists at Bossa. And so we would go through, we'd pick a bunch that we thought were visually really cool, and we were always like, okay, we've got both like bigger frame, smaller frame, and then we want really large ethnic diversity within that. And then we'd like pick out ones that we liked, and then we'd like, cool, write like a little thing to go with them. And it was kind of like just slowly like bringing it down to what we like wanted to ship with. But there's loads of work that's been done on that side. So, it's who knows what they'll do with that.
And I think it's great, to be honest. It's a great improvement. I wouldn't say improvement. It's a great successor to what Surgeon Simulator 1 was, which, lacked there for, I think for design reasons and for time reasons. So it's quite nice to see that Boss has obviously thought about that and has invested so much about that. It's something, try to have more diverse games, more diverse players. It's something what I always try to push. So seeing different ethnical group, different races being portrayed in video games, I think it's quite important.
Yeah, and I think it's important to have those as like designed characters, not just as like an option in a custom, like in a character customizer who like, oh, you can totally have a character with dark skin, but we haven't necessarily like designed the lighting to work well with that or things like that. So for us it was kind of like, no, they are like authored characters. How much backstory they have at this point I don't really know, but in terms of like they have an authored look, and then you can accessorize them and choose their outfits, but they are like Penny is Penny, Milo is Milo, Heather is Heather, Kamal is Kamal, all of that stuff. It's like these are specific characters, and that was like really important to us because it also just represents like the diversity that's within Bossa itself. So
and I think this is great because a lot of the time, especially if you don't have much budget, the cheapest thing, the simplest things you can do is just to have like a white character and just like change the color of the skin. And I'm like, okay, this is great, but being black doesn't just mean having black skin. It's not just a genetic thing, and it's not just look. Often there's a very different background story because of the fact that you grew black, maybe in from black parents in a society that is in a certain way. So I think that being able, as you say, to have characters that preserve the identity of those characters, it feels to me a really good a step in the right direction, I would say, to correctly portray how those even maybe the background stories, the struggle that different characters might have in their life and how they reach to certain positions. So sounds like
I don't know really actually what it was. It's kind of like a big discussion we had, which is why like Benarge is never really talked about as being a specific place and not a specific time, just because like the 1950s in the UK was not actually a great time for like a lot of people, like, so that wasn't something we necessarily was like, oh yes, and now we want to like deal with all the hard conversations about like what it was like to be black in the 1950s in the UK and all that kind of stuff. We're like, we want this to be nice and we want it to have this aesthetic, but it can also be like super positive. And I like to think that all of the characters as they are portrayed in like trailers and stuff feel like very kind of like fun, empowered, and everyone, and like people, from watching the streamers who have had access to it so far, it's been really nice to see that everyone like likes to choose all the different characters. Like there doesn't seem to be just like, everyone, if they're a white dude, decides to play Milo. It's kind of like, no, it's like a great opportunity to just like play as any of the characters you think is aesthetically cool. And I think they all are. So yeah, it's great.
I'm really looking forward to play the game. I hope I can be better Surgeon Simulator 2 compared to how bad I am for Surgeon Simulator 1. So I hope that...
If nothing else, you can move around.
Oh, God. I, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I will blame you personally.
Make no promises on that, I'll be honest.
If that... We'll see. We'll see. So, there's, of course, you work on a lot of other projects, and before working on Surgeon Simulator, you've actually worked on the Bradwell Conspiracy, and in that one you had a much stronger input on that. And we were chatting a couple of days ago, and you mentioned I'm the second in command on the Bradwell Conspiracy. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, okay, so that was 4.5 years of active development. And then 5 years pretty much from like when I started to when it came out, because we had 6 months of like port time, which I was not involved with, but I was having to still kind of look in on like marketing materials and stuff because, for release and things. So I was kind of brought on to that because I applied for Breakthrough Brit one year as kind of a bit of a lark. I didn't really think I was going to get it, but I was kind of in a place where I was like, well, I got time. I might as well apply. And I'm working on this Salt game. So who knows, that might come out and be successful. So I applied for that. And then George Backer was on the jury for that. I didn't get that, by the way, if anyone's interested. But he saw like my application, all the videos I put with it and everything. And he was like impressed with me and my work and whatever. So he was like, I got a message from someone at BAFTA being like, oh, is it okay if this person contacts you? And I was like, yeah, that's fine. Whatever. We ended up then meeting at EGX, I think, that same year in the September. And yeah, he was like, oh, I want to bring you on to do, if you're interested, like I'll send you over all the stuff that I have, which was at that time kind of a rough story document. The story is nothing like what shipped, but it has some elements that were in there, and then some gameplay ideas, which was like the substance printing gun, like 3D printing gun, and the idea of using like a guide thing to communicate with someone else. So I came on to do art direction and narrative design, so that he was like, you've obviously proven yourself in doing art stuff because you've done that for a few projects. And I mean, this was still highly indie, so it was like, we'll still have quite a small team, but like you can kind of like lead the charge on that a little bit. And yeah, if you're interested in doing narrative design, obviously you can come on and help with that as well. And I was like, yeah, cool, brilliant. It kind of like lets me do my thing. And that project was supposed to take a year, which obviously did not turn out. We like massively overscoped it. It originally had double the amount of levels that it shipped with. And we actually rebuilt the game, I think, like 3 times. So
feels very pikuniku.
It's one of those where you're just like, oh, it'll be fine. We're just doing a Gone Home. And then I actually read like the reason Gone Home is just a house is because they wanted to ship it in a year. And then I kind of messaged George and being like, we decided not to make like a house. We decided to make like a huge underground sci-fi science facility.
Good. Yep. But I think that you mentioned the very essence of indie games. There's a lot of discussion on what does it mean to be indie. Not anymore now, because all the indies are dead, of course. They starve to death. but there's a strong conversation about what characteristics a game needs to have to be considered an indie title. And some people think it's budget, some people think it's people, some people think it's the publisher, how it was delivered and how much artistic input you had on that. And I think you mentioned the only thing that makes an indie game. You thought it was taking 1 year, it took more than 4. That to me is the essence.
The classic. It was overscoped and we had no producer to like slap us down and tell us, no, that's not possible.
That is what indie means.
So yeah, my first bit of advice in life is to have a producer if you can, right from the beginning of even your like indie project, if you're going to involve other people in it, because yeah, it's a big difference to being like, oh, I think this is going to take 1 year of my life, to being like, it took 4.5. So, at that point, you're kind of like, you've staked, not staked, but like you've put a lot of your career time into it. And so therefore, like, you want it to be good. Then the pressure for it to be good kind of rises as well, the longer it's in production, because you're like, that kind of like sunk cost fallacy thing. Like it's got to be good now. It's got to be good. So yeah, I mean, it's a miracle that thing ships. Like I say, we rebuilt it like 3 times, massively changed the way that we did puzzles, built the levels, like all of that stuff, like changed hugely over production. Ultimately, I'm really like proud of what we shipped in the end. I mean, it's got some like tech bugs, and I'm kind of like, I actually physically can't do anything about those things because I know nothing about that system. But in terms of the things I had immediate control over, and the team in general, I'm like, they're such like wonderful people, and I'm so like pleased to have worked with them, and also that they trusted me with, like, in some cases, like the artists, like they trusted me to be an art director to them. It was very nice. So we had a great time. I miss them a lot.
So one question I have, and it's related, of course, to the Bradwell Conspiracy, but I think that it sort of extends to a lot of other games. Why do you think that rundown scientific facilities are so popular in games? Like, it's an entire genre, I guess, of facilities that are like destroyed by something, and they have a sci-fi look. Why do you think it's so common? Or even like destroyed facilities in general? Why is it because they're easier to design? You can put like some debris whenever?
I mean, there's that. I actually don't. I mean, that was actually kind of the hard bit, because we'd build the like level as like the clean version first, and then we'd have to go in and like break it up, and that would usually be someone's job. Usually Rudy, he would have to go in and like break a bunch of stuff up, and that was,
I would love that.
such a lot
I would
of his
love to have
time.
that
Bless
job.
him. I feel really sorry for him. It took a long time. But I think, well, first it's kind of like the whole like Mary Celeste thing, where there was that boat that just all the people disappeared. Obridgen, I guess, similar in the end. Where it's just like all the people are gone. You're like, what was here? And it's just easy to kind of go into a place that has been evacuated and find everything just like left as it was. And it kind of feels almost like a siege or something. Like, everything was like set up and you can go in. It's almost like immersive theater. You can just like pick stuff up, and no one's going to tell you not to pick up their stuff because they're not there to tell you off. So you're like, yeah, I'm going to listen to all your voice memos and read all your email. So that's why abandoned places. Sci-fi, I think lots of people in games love genre fiction. I personally love sci-fi over fantasy. So we wanted it to be sci-fi quite early on. But for me, I was like, I want it to be like 2001, A Space Odyssey sci-fi. I don't want it to be Alien. So that's why the aesthetic is what it is like this kind of like brutalist, kind of mid-century modern aesthetic, but also that the colors are like really strong for me. Like, I really wanted this like super dramatic lighting for everything, where everything feels kind of almost like, as I say, fake and dramatic and in some way theatrical. Just because I really like that games can be a place, like they can represent real places, but ultimately they're kind of they are false, and so therefore we can amplify that a lot. I love films that also have like really strong lighting design, so that's kind of what that's in that game, and that's probably why the performance in some areas is not the best, because I really love a dynamic light or 7.
I think, to be honest, that the art direction of the Bradwell Conspiracy, it's amazing. I absolutely love not just how... No, it's true. Not just how...
I paid him to say that as well, just before we started.
Not just how it looks, like the structure and everything, but the actual style as well of the 3D models that they had. It's a specific style. And I really like it how it's not low poly, but it's... medium poly. Is that a term for that?
Yeah, well, so the aesthetic kind of I basically had like an art direction Bible for new people coming onto the project, and there was like a environment one, and there was also, because we had a specific way we were doing environments with like very few tiling textures, which I really liked as a system. It works really nicely. And then for the like props and stuff, it was like everything has to have like a very strong, chunky silhouette, and then has these really like big bevels on it, because all of the materials are like it is using PBR, but it's kind of like doing it in like a cheapy way where we're just putting kind of colors in there. So everything's very low specular, and even the metals are kind of like looked almost like brush metal. So to have like a big bevel on it was really important to make the object still catch the light where they transition from one side to another. So we had that, and then we also used a swatch system. So basically, we had a texture which was like just a square that had other little colored squares in the square. That was very low, like texture size. Then we would swap it out basically for each level. So there was like a standard set of colors on this side, and then there was like level specific colors on the like last row. And therefore, when you swapped the material over for the next level, you could totally just recolor a bunch of the assets. So like all of the chairs and stuff you see are the same chairs from level to level, but we're just swapping the material so they look and like tie in with the new environment. And so each of our levels is very specifically like color, like all of it was like color scripted basically to be like, okay, so medical is all pinks and neutrals. Water treatment is purples and greens. I forget what the other ones were, but they and induction, the first level is all like really hot colors, so like yellows, oranges, reds. So it was kind of like a good way to get some more mileage out of assets when we didn't have that many artists to produce them. It was a good way to just kind of like move them from one place to another, and they'll feel new, or at least you won't see as much of the repetition of stuff. But yeah, that was the thing I kind of got from Lego, where we used to just do color swatches for everything, and you had like a specific color palette, and you just pick stuff and you go like, well, this is what I have to work with, so make it work. And I think that way you kind of get more creative with your decisions when you're like boxing yourself in a bit. Otherwise it's just like you could go anywhere.
And I think you mentioned about the workflow that you have for the assets, and I think that we're watching right now the first level basically being the first like 10 minutes being played. And just by looking at that, I can see already probably 1,000 objects, 1,000 3D models. So I'm imagining, how hard it must be to create 15 different chairs and 20 tables, and
yeah,
60.
I mean, a lot of that
windows.
stuff is the same stuff. It's the placing of it that also takes so much time.
I'm imagining. So we actually have a few comments, a few in the chat.
Yeah,
I think that they cover both Surgeon Simulator and the Bradwell Conspiracy. We have Dan saying, "I'm ready to get my hands all up in some dude's rib cage."
Yes, good.
I'm not sure I can say that, but
I think we just did, so it's fine.
Is it compliant with social distance? I don't know. But if it's that, it's okay, I guess. We also have Fede that says that it's very disappointed that he thought I was baking my biscuits. No, people would have died. People would have died if I had baked my biscuits. So,
you never like baked biscuits?
No, well, I did it once. And I baked biscuits in, it was a bit cheating. I baked colored biscuits in the shape of Thomas Was Alone shapes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I don't know if you had one. And one time I made Lego Jello.
Okay, like I'm assuming like in a mold.
Yeah, well, yes. So I got one of those ice cube tray with the Lego bricks thing. So I made like this giant bag, just container of Lego bricks made of Jello. and I brought them to. Yes, it was developed in Brighton, and it was
Oh,
like
okay.
35 degrees. And basically, by the time they arrived, they were like all joined together.
Oh no, I can literally imagine it now, just like slowly this amorphous blob of jello of different. Is it of different colors? Because I'm imagining it's of different
There were
colors, and
different
it's
colors,
just
yeah.
yeah, just
And
giant slime from like Dragon Quest or
I
something.
remember some people not realizing how disgusting it was, putting their hands inside, touching one, and basically a line of Lego bricks, amorphous Lego bricks came in there, and they were like, "What do I do? I just want one."
It's there's also just that thing where like you telling this story in the middle of a pandemic is like actively making me like just kind of go like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. Like, oh, touching things other people have touched food wise, like, oh no.
I've actually had some developers that were like, "Oh no, sorry, I can't get biscuits because the package is open," and I'm like super paranoid about germs. So I
Right.
also had like mini packages of biscuits that weren't open in case
And you'd be
people
like,
had
have a
that.
packet?
So I started, to step up and get all the different variants. Now, we also have one comment from Team asking, in recent years, a lot of games have leaned into adding a story when none would have previously existed. For example, Zachtronic's game. What do you think
Yeah.
are the cultural factors driving this change? It's a quite
Oh.
deep question.
Oh, that's a great question. I think one, like you have to think about who developers are. And I mean, I don't have any facts on this, but I can just in from the developers that I know, there is a big interest from a lot of them to tell stories, right? That part of the like drive to become a game developer is to like they would probably be the type of players who are also maybe like interested in story in some way, but that's not obviously true for every developer. Like I know plenty of people who don't care about that kind of stuff and are very like mechanics focused. Um, but I can speak to like my partner John, who was generally that type of player, but then since playing games in the like 6 years that we've been together, and I'm very like narrative focused and like to find secrets and stuff, has really changed and influenced the way that he not only plays games, but then how he wants to make them going forward. So like there's that element. There's kind of wanting to include the stuff where because there are players who just like story stuff, and that's a really good way to like keep them engaged. So if you're going to add crafting, why not also add some story as well? And they're trying to accommodate for like all the different types of player that you can get on that that player spectrum thing. um and it is just a good way of keeping people engaged, right? Everyone loves a mystery, and it helps. Like people want to know what happens. As much as like the end is normally not satisfying in the slightest, it's the anticipation of wanting to know, like, and it itches at people in a very like fundamental way where it keeps them playing. So that can sound kind of like insidious, I just realized, but I think it helps also then kind of add context to games. But I think, there's still a huge amount of games that don't have story, or like don't have story. They probably have a world, or at least like an aesthetic that feels like it's evoking a world of some description. And also games have always had stories because they come like lots of stuff comes from like being influenced by like Dungeons and Dragons and whatever. So it's always been here, it'll always be here, etc etc.
So, well, I don't know, Tim, if this answers the question. Let us know if you want to follow up on that. But
Is the Zach actually? I'd be interested to know if the Zachtronic question is specifically about Eliza, or if it's about like some of Zach's own games and if they've had story in them. Because I can't actually say if those have story, and I know some of them have like context for them, like what is it? TIS?
TIS
No,
100, yeah.
yeah. So that has like obviously the manual, which gives you this like backstory about an uncle who is obsessed with this computer. So that has like a setting, but ultimately the game has nothing to do with it. But then Eliza was actually is predominantly someone else's game, and that Zachtronics is more kind of like its publisher, or that they brought him on to make that game, but that he is like a writer fundamentally. So that's why Eliza is a narrative game. If that also answers a very specific question.
Tim is saying all these puzzles are built around a narrative framework. And I think that this is true for a lot of games, that so I think there are many ways in which you can actually do stories in games. And one is by actually having the story, basically. So you know what's going to happen. You're telling the players what happened one way or another. And another one is just to leave elements to let players figure out for themselves. So you can leave like breadcrumbs around the area, or piece of conversation, or as you said, probably the manual of TIS 100 that doesn't give you the story of the game, but it has evidence.
Yeah, it sets up like, what is the context? What's the world I'm going into? What's the role I am playing as the player? I'm super into all of that stuff. Like, that's my favorite thing about narrative design specifically, and like why I don't necessarily sell myself as like a writer first and foremost, because the thing I really find interesting is like one, player emotion, but also like setting the player up to take on a role of something in the game. And it's like, how do you set up that context? And it can be as easy as just like, well, this is kind of like sci-fi, and you're like hacking into like people's emails with like Hack Run or something. But ultimately that's just like a narrative game where you read stuff and like, you know, find information that then you use for like passwords in places. Because ultimately loads of stuff is just like lock and key, like find the solution to this thing. But how you dress it up is all that makes that kind of stuff interesting. Granted, not everything does this. Bubba is you, just a fun thing to play around with. And I don't think everything needs story, but you know, I'm pretty sure there's a whole thing about like why he made Bubba, because it was like, before it was just like blocks or something, and then having it like have a personality of some description, just like ease the player in a bit more and kind of like, okay, I identify with this bobbly thing, and then when I become something else, that's like, I'm okay with that because I've identified with this thing first.
And I feel that if you have a strong story in something like Baba Is You, then you need to suspend the disbelief of this puzzle being completely out of this world. So how do you justify the fact that by moving blocks you change the universe? You know, it would probably be quite a very weird scenario. So sometimes it's probably okay.
Yeah, like a linear story is certainly not needed for every game by any stretch of the imagination. But I think worlds add a lot for sure, even just for like tone and emotion.
That's quite interesting. So moving on, you've been working, of course, on a lot of big games like Surgeon Simulator and the Bradwell Conspiracy, but you've also worked on some, smaller game. Let's go with that. Tiny games.
Tiny.
I love tiny games. They're the best ones because usually they're very truthful to what you wanted to deliver, to the message you wanted to deliver.
Yeah, right, exactly.
One of them is Mama Seuss.
Mama Seuss.
Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yes. I mean, what a funny little thing. Oh my god. Okay, so this starts with as you can see on our beautiful description here, that I was part of the Code Liberation workshop that Phoenix Perry ran in what does it say there? 2016. So there we go, 2016. Which was like partnered with the V&A. And that was a 6-week course. And so previously to this, I have worked on a game called Salt, which we'll get to in a bit. But ultimately, a bunch of the coding for that was done by my partner, because I was like, I don't really know how to code. I don't think I can do it. Like all of this sort of stuff. And, just the general kind of like, I don't know where to start. So I just kind of won't. And even if I looked into it, I'd get super overwhelmed. So when I saw Code Liberation come up, I was like, okay, I can go into like a safe space and be this person who knows nothing about programming, but maybe come out of it in the end knowing something about programming. And Mama Seuss was the thing that I made. I already had a load of experience with Unity itself. So like dealing with like making 3D models and importing them and creating materials, all of that stuff was fine. Creating particles, fine. Doing lighting, fine. It was just like, I just don't know how to link up anything with scripts. So like, as I say, my partner helped me quite a bit with like figuring out how I should structure that code, but ultimately he'd be like, you kind of want it to do this, and then it was up to me to kind of go away and figure out how that would work. And I discovered that I really love it. Like, I really enjoy it. I'm not great, even like, I'm actually pretty terrible still now because I left it for like 3 years and have started again now. But I really enjoy it. And yeah, it was really fun to make something where I was kind of like, I kind of don't care how it looks. It's going to have like this aesthetic that I want on it, which was this kind of Cooking Mama like inspired thing. And I just had a really strong idea of what I wanted to make from the beginning, just like this Cooking Mama meets massage simulator thing. And I was just like, oh yeah, and then you can use like a DS4, as in like a PS4 controller, to just be like, oh yeah, and then you do like the weird thing on your shoulders where you do this. So then I was like, okay, cool. And then for like doing up and down, you do this. And then when you do, what was it, tapping one? Oh yeah, so then that's like triggers. So I was like, okay, that's really just like, it's silly because it's using, I've always also really enjoyed all the alt control stuff that like you and Robin have always done. So I was also really inspired by that because we were doing a bunch of then controller stuff. So I did actually build a controller for it as well, but I managed to burn out the sliders that I put into it, so it didn't actually work.
Oh, the resistors.
I fried them.
The resistors. Yeah, I've been there.
Which was super, it's super bad. I was like, I put it all together and it was in this cool box and it had like buttons and stuff. And I was like, cool, now I've just got to like hook it up to the code and then I'm done. And then I'd like plug it in. It would just like get nothing. And I was just like, no.
And a black smoke.
So I had it there at the V&A kind of like on the side, almost as like, oh yeah, this prototype thing could work one day. But yeah, that bit didn't come off very well, but I really enjoyed doing all of that stuff. So in the future, maybe do some more controller stuff. But for now, I'm just kind of enjoying getting into like programming again and just, you know, I think it's I don't know if who here in the audience or whatever isn't from a university background, because I haven't been to university. I don't have higher education beyond sixth form. I went and did like a vocational course in 3D for 3 months and then had to like just work on a portfolio for like a year and a half before I got my first job. Yeah, like kind of like learning how to do some of this stuff when you haven't just had like a kind of almost like safe space to learn this stuff where everyone's learning is kind of a bit scary. So that's why I think like things like Code Liberation are really good, where it's just like, it's free, you can go, it's a very non-judgmental atmosphere, everyone's there to like help each other. So yeah, if anyone ever gets the chance to if you're like a femme identifying person, I think they also do non-binary people, but I can't guarantee that. You'll need to look at the website. But if any more of those come up, I really recommend you check them out because it's amazing. And the people who you'll meet there will be incredible. I can guarantee it.
So I think also a shout out to Phoenix Perry, who is running that. I was actually working together with Phoenix Perry at Goldsmith. Now she moved to do her own thing, which, you know, I'm really, really happy for that. And I think that she has always tried to support people as much as she could. You know, it's something that definitely, you know, it's one of our target. And I think that Code Liberation worked really well for a lot of people.
Yeah.
One of the problems, you know, I'm working in education as well on many different fronts. I teach at Goldsmith, of course, but also I write educational resources online at various different level of skills. You know?
I really enjoyed your Creatures AI video, by the way.
Thank you so much.
Because I loved Creatures growing up, and I never understood how they worked, right? Because they were all those like you go into the grass and stuff, and I'm just like, I never understood what any of this meant, like at all.
So I'm not kidding. It is really a love letter to Creature, because that game was so important for me. Like, I wouldn't be here. Oh my God, then I shouldn't have played it. I wouldn't be here today. What have I done?
What have I done to myself? Jeez.
If I hadn't played Creatures, and actually all my lectures, well, not all my lectures, all like the first lecture of all my modules, they start with a slides about Creatures, because that is the story of how, that is the start of how I ended up in that position, you know, and it's the...
Yeah. Where you're like, how does this work? I would like to know.
Exactly. And I think that without that game, I wouldn't know that. I wouldn't have a passion for biology. I was doing a PhD in neurotechnology, you know, another life. So I wouldn't have invested so much time into studying programming and biology and computer science and all this kind of topics. So I think that it's also a reminder to parents that maybe are watching. I don't know if Annie's watching, but that games can be, you know, a waste of time, but some games can also be an endless source of inspiration. So if your kids is...
Absolutely. I mean, the reason I wanted to get into games development was because of The Sims 2 and the fact that it shipped with the Body Shop. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but basically it was a way that you could like export a texture sheet, paint over it in Photoshop, or at least I didn't have Photoshop at that time. I had Paint Shop Pro that I borrowed off my granddad, and and I drew on it with a mouse because I didn't have a tablet or anything like that. Used gradients and things, and then you could put it back in the game. And I was like, oh my God, I love this. Like, just being able to retexture stuff is great. And obviously there were people who like put stuff up that was like absolutely amazing, and my stuff was shockingly bad actually. But I really just enjoyed the ability to like make something and then put it into something else and see it like, oh, I can understand, like, and then let you understand kind of like how scenes worked. For example, if you put something like some detail down the side and then you see it stretch, you'd be like, oh, I understand.
UV mapping.
Yeah, exactly. And then like I remember I did like a bit of that for like Second Life at one point when I was into Second Life teens.
That's a dark phase nobody should talk about.
So yeah, now I think an amazing thing is actually like Fortnite and their events. I think are just like such a cool thing that have been invented, especially like during lockdown, being able to just like go to this shared space and experience a like big world event together is like really, really cool. So yeah, I'm one of those people who started playing Fortnite over lockdown.
So I think
would recommend though, for sure.
I think that if you're a parent and your kids are spending money on Candy Crush, slap them. Slap them with the back of your hand as hard as you can. But if your kids are playing Minecraft, even Fortnite, if they're playing I don't know if they're playing The Sims 4 anymore. I don't know if it's still a thing today.
Yeah, I think so. I've been watching Abby do the 100 baby challenge, so on Giant Bomb, and that's been entertaining and educational. I'm sure.
Can you still kill people if you remove the ladder while in the swimming pool?
Oh, I hope so. I mean, I haven't played it in years because it's like a slippery slope for me that I'll just get in there. I mean, I've been playing too much Animal Crossing anyway, so.
Oh, exactly. But, if your kids are playing some of those games, they have a social aspect, they have a creative aspects, they have a educational aspects as well, because they will get interested in some of those things. Don't stop them, for fuck's sake. Encourage them, like... or maybe if you want to control them and you're worried, join. Make an account and play with them.
Yeah, like find out why they're interested in that thing. Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because like when I first started in the industry, my mum, she'd be like, oh, so have you been working on? I was like, okay, I'll load up like one of these Lego games and we can try it. She just did not understand how like an analog stick like links in with a 3D environment. But then I remember like one time she came to visit me when I was living in Knutsford, and my mum lives like in the southeast, so like that's a long trip, so she'd stay with me for the weekend. And I remember on one of those trips, I made her play Journey, and she still mentions it to this day. She's like, "Oh, the game with the people with the scarves," And I was like, yes, exactly. And she loved like being able to walk up to some like one of the other characters who'd be there and like, you know, like chirp at them and all this stuff. So and my mum like is not a gamer. She will not like go out and seek games out or anything like that. But that made her interested enough that then like when I talk to her about it, she like shows interest. And I know like some other people just don't don't even like show that interest in like stuff that their kids are interested in. So yeah, like be interested in what they're into, because you might find that they are have something that it's giving them in some way, like like a creative outlet or something, or means that they get interested in a certain thing. I always really appreciate the fact that my parents were kind of just like, yeah, do what you want. And then I would like sit for weekends and build like pixel art things for like an entire weekend. They weren't like, oh, go outside, you know. Because then I ended up doing this sort of stuff for work. And it's like, you know, that stuff can be valuable and can inform what you want to do, you know?
I feel it's great. And I hope that as game developers, now that we know that, now that that's a thing you can actually like research and look up, because that wasn't the thing when I was younger. I'd like research things into games and how they were made, and I got really obsessed with any developer diaries I could find, because I was like, nice. I want to do this, I just don't really know how, and I don't know who these people are, but their lives seem fascinating. And like I got so into watching the Lionhead ones when I was like a late teen, because I was like, that is my goal, that is where I want to work, I'll do anything, like I work really hard to get there. And then obviously actually by the time I got to the point where that was actually a feasible option, they closed down. No.
So this is kind of like why I always like warn people about having like dream jobs or dream places to work, or like this idea of like a 5-year plan where it's like, I know I'm going to like work here because, you know, sometimes things can happen that one in your personal life you don't expect that can like throw you off the rails, but two, like those things can go away, those things can get shut down. So like, you know, I think it's really important actually to have that kind of like goal to like yourself and like what you're interested in, kind of pursuing your interests. But I think that's also why I have a super varied like work history.
But I think it's fun in a way, because you're learning a lot. And I mean, it's also true that the security, the safety of a full-time permanent job, you know, it's very appealing. But at the same time, yes, often it crystallizes you. And if you get one when you're 20, maybe by that time you do not have enough skills to get a good job, or you do not have enough, you did not explore enough jobs to find your vocation, if that's a thing, or what you like.
Absolutely.
So I think that having a chance to play different roles and, you know, experiments with different titles, different industries, it can be really rewarding personally, because you learn a lot and you have a better perspective on how different things work. Now, when I see a game, I don't think in terms of what I see. I'm imagining what's beyond, you know. I'm thinking, how many people?
Like, how did this come to be? How does this random thing work?
Exactly.
I am obsessed with trying to work out like how people's narrative systems work.
Shaders.
And like what stuff they're like tracking in the background. I'm just like, oh, it's so fascinating. And I won't ever know. Like, for the most part, I won't ever know, but I just like to theorize about it. Same with materials, actually, or like shaders. It's that thing of like, I need to kind of stop myself from trying to learn everything, because I would try if I could. But shaders is that thing where like, I'll like watch your tutorials and stuff just to kind of like have an idea of like how something might work. And then I'm like, cool, I'm never going to try that though.
I tried it for you, don't worry.
Like look at things and be like, oh, I think it's this effect that's happening. And just have that understanding of like what it could be, as opposed to like, oh, I could build it myself. But like, no, I can just like look at it and understand it a bit. It's still also really like nice, useful way to like nourish your brain.
It's great. I have exactly that for shaders, as you mentioned. And I love YouTube videos, for example, or tutorials that show how to redo effects from specific games, or GDC talks that explain how they did that effects in games and stuff like that. And actually, one of the reasons why I started working on shaders is because I was a GDC I think the first time maybe, and at that time I haven't had any experience with shaders, or maybe I tried and I closed them immediately after seeing the pure
Like,
madness.
that looks horrible.
And I think I watched a talk by the people that made Kentucky Route Zero, and they show the effect where you have the bricks of the house fading and revealing the inner of the house, and I was like, whoa, that's a shader. And they sort of showed, and I was like, I'm going home, I'm redoing that.
I'm gonna do it.
I'm gonna do it.
The things disappear.
And I think that probably was, I mean, if I look at it now, it would be, yes, 3 lines of code. But took 3 years to get the 3 lines of code.
You have to do the terrible thing first. Like, you just have to. Like, I approached this whole year with, like, because I got myself into, like, a really weird, strange place after Bradwell, or actually kind of, like, whilst I was in Bradwell, because, like, you have the title of art director, right? Or, well, I did. So I had this weird, like, imposter syndrome about the fact that I had that as a job title. And yet if I produced art on my own and just kind of, like, showed it, I was like, I need this to feel like it's worthy of having this title, right? And I was kind of, like, got myself really locked into this kind of, like, I guess creative, like, frame where I wasn't able to move out of it. And I was like, I can make stuff for the game, but, like, I can't really make anything outside of it because I'm scared it will be bad. And it really locked up my creativity in, like, a really bad way. I ended up doing a bunch of, like, lino printing courses and stuff to just have, like, a different way to explore my artwork. And that's actually been really helpful for me through lockdown as well, just to have, like, a really physical thing to do. And it's, like, completely separate from this whole world of, like, making games and stuff. So yeah, there's, like, that way that I froze myself up, and then, like, I was like, oh, and then if I want to go out and find more work, they're also going to be expecting me to, like, be amazing in some way. And, like, in some ways, like, I feel like my art falls down in, like, a bunch of ways that I haven't practiced because I've just been working on this one game for so long that I haven't really worked on any of these other things. Like, I've never touched Substance Designer, for example, because I haven't needed to. But that's, like, a thing. If I want to go into another art job, I'm going to have to, like, go in there and learn it. And so, like, for me, this year was a lot about, like, I need to kind of, like, shake off those shackles of, like, job titles and whatever, and, like, these expectations, and kind of just do stuff that makes me happy and make me excited and lets me kind of, like, it's just the year of doing, and it doesn't matter if it's bad, good stuff. It just needs to be stuff I'm interested in, and it doesn't matter if, like, what the quote quality of those things are. I just want to do and kind of get myself back used to kind of just doing creative things. And that's been really helpful. I think, actually, like, initially lockdown was really tough for me, but I think, like, I'm coming out the other side because I'm just like, you know, I'm really interested in wanting to make this game about working at a tram stop. And I want it to have this rotoscope animation. So I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to make it. And it's been really nice, given me a lot of joy, made me excited to get up in the morning. Feel energetic. It's all good.
So, do you want to talk a bit about this tram stop game you're working on?
Yeah, I'll talk about the tram stop game. I mean, there's not really much to say
it's
about it right now.
It's the official title now. We call it like that.
It's you know, it's a prototype. It's or it's not even a prototype at the moment. It's actually, like, some ideas coming together, and they're, like, meeting each other for the first time. And you're like, hey, how are you? But yeah, so I wanted it to have this kind of, like, lo-fi aesthetic, whatever. The very kind of, like, soft anime look that's very, like, now. I wanted to have that. And then I really wanted to have this, like, rotoscope animation in it because Sync Studios, I think that's what they were called, in Japan, who made Hotel Dusk and Trace Memory, all of those, were, like, some of my favorite games that have ever been made. The DS was, like, an incredible console. It's my favorite console of all time, I'd say. And the rotoscope animation that's in Hotel Dusk and its sequel, something Hotel, I can't remember, is, like, amazing. I love it. I love everything about that game. So I was like, I really want to do my own version of that. And I mean, I have easy access to myself. So at the moment, the person who is in there is me, me and my partner. So that's that. And then in terms of the like story, I wanted it to be really focused on community. I for anyone who knows me, doesn't know me, whatever, I live in Muswell Hill in London, which is like basically like a village inside London. It's in North London. It's just up from Highgate. So it doesn't have a tube, so therefore its population density is actually quite low because it's not like, it's quite convenient, but it's not super convenient. So a lot of people move here are like families. There's still quite a lot of social housing around here as well. So yeah, it's kind of got this really nice vibe. It's very bohemian. It's like there's a lot of just like creatives who live here. I like that one of the ladies I know was like a puppet. She was like a model maker for like films, so she works on like Labyrinth and stuff, and I just think she's like the coolest lady I've ever met in my life. But anyway, so it has a real community vibe because you'll like see the same people. Like we know the baristas at our local coffee shop, like all that kind of stuff. And that's been really nice because I'm generally not like a city person. So it's been really nice to have that kind of like familiarity within a big city to be like, oh, I can go out to the shops and I might see one of my friends while I'm there and I'll be able to say hello. So I wanted to bring that kind of feeling into a game where it's like, it's about community and like that you see these same people over and over again and you're building a relationship with them, but you are still like a service worker. In this case, you're like, providing tickets and stuff. But if someone asks for a ticket, you can be like, oh, where are you going? And they're like, oh, well, I'm going to this place. I've got a job interview. And then if they show up the next day, you can be like, oh my gosh, how did the job interview go? And it's kind of like that, kind of building rapport sort of thing. And also, I guess you can learn about your character as well while they're there. So a good reference point for it is like Kiki's Delivery Service mixed with Midnight Diner. If anyone's watched that on Netflix, would recommend. It's very, very good. And it's just like about mini stories basically. And it's just like they have the regulars who are always there. And then there are like new characters that come in, and then the regulars kind of almost act as like a chorus or something in a traditional Greek theatre sort of way.
And it seems to like this game has, a very strong narrative foundation, which is probably the thing you want to explore, I guess.
Yeah, and also I just wanted to also put in, there's going to have some mini game stuff in there because also Hotel Dusk has those, so it just has like a little interaction sequence. So I was like, okay, I really want it to be, you have a bit where they give you coins and you have to put the coins like in the till and then you have to give them their change, and that to be like an interaction you have to do. I think Florence is actually a really good example of that, where it's just like, part of the storytelling is the interaction that you take place in. Because I want you to inhabit that role of like, yeah, I want to print that ticket, I want to do this. Oh my god, Night in the Woods is also like strong vibes of that as well, where it's just like, you have a bunch of talking, but then you actually do some stuff as well that feels like it matches in with the context.
The part where with your little furry hand you take, with the furry paws you take like the donuts. Oh my god, I love it.
A pizza,
yeah.
Get a slice of pizza.
There was a donut.
So good. I mean, there's probably a donut bit as well. I think it depends on which bits of the story you go to.
Of course, for me, it was a donut. It had to be, right? So.
It's a donut.
But I think it's quite nice. We've been having the video of the Tram stop game looping, and so we've been seeing your GIF like 50 times. Like,
and my face.
£1.70. The shock. So that was quite nice.
Oh god, it's so true.
So
I have actually just like recorded a bunch more like emotions. The other day, I just need to animate them, but I'm kind of putting it off because it's like the animation is like a lot of work, and I gave myself like a funny elbow last time because I didn't give myself enough breaks. So yeah, I watched that YouTube channel that's about like paint restoration, like paintings restoration. I don't
Like,
know if you've
oh,
seen any of that.
it's a
Like Baumgarten,
yes, yes,
about
yes. It's the one that
yeah,
it's the one that sounds like
restorations. They're
Robin.
very good. They're very calming. But anyway, I like that he says like I can only do this for a certain amount of time a day, and I'm like I should take that advice and only, make animations for like a maximum of maybe like an hour a day, because otherwise I'll knacker my elbow. So, you know,
I
advice for us all really. Just like look after yourself physically, and it's a marathon, not a sprint.
And the weird thing is that he keeps saying that, but I feel like I could watch his videos for like 6 hours in a row. So I could watch him
Yeah.
actually scraping like, paint for like 6 hours.
It's very satisfying.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd be that person who's like, oh, I'm really excited for the bit where he cleans the painting.
Oh my God, I'm obsessed with that. And I have to say, I'm very jealous of his beard.
He's got a glorious beard, like for real.
Like, I have a good beard,
very
obviously,
good.
but it's not as good as his beard. So I think when I'm watching the part where he talks, I'm like, oh.
Let's get back to the scraping, man. That's what I'm here for.
Beard envy.
Yeah.
I'm glad he doesn't have a mustache, because that would totally destroy imposter syndrome for mustache, I guess.
Like where it would come like out.
Yeah, exactly.
And you
Yeah,
like twiddle it at the end.
yeah. I could not.
Like a villain.
Oh, God.
Or Salvador Dali.
No, that's a bit too much.
Too much.
So, before you work on Tram Stop, which, as we said, is very strongly narrative, you've actually been working on another narrative game that never really got released, probably, or never really got to the point where I think the world managed to play it. Do you want to talk a bit about Salt?
Yeah, I'll talk about Salt. So, given that this is still called Gamedev Graveyard, this is my Gamedev Graveyard game for sure. Like, I've got a bunch of projects that like I started but ultimately did not even begin to be a thing, whereas this is one that I fully started. And basically, I started working on this, I think I was about like maybe 22, 23, can't really remember now. And was basically an exploration of my negative relationship with social media. Specifically, it's like looking at like how I think this used to be much more of a thing when like Facebook was so much more of a social media. It's not so, I don't think this is so much of a problem for people these days, but maybe on Instagram and stuff, I don't really know. But it would be that thing where like I'm no longer with this person, but they keep popping up on my timeline for various reasons, and I don't want to see them. So, but I can't help myself but look at it. That's why it was called Salt, because initially it came from this idea that I had, which was like, I had this real like vision one evening, and it was basically like the idea of someone scrolling through social media and then they saw something that was like upsetting to them in some way because of like a past relationship, and it would then have this screen that would be like one handful of salt in the palm and then one hand out flat like that, and it had like a slight cut on it, and it would just be like and it would like it would put the salt on there and they'd like rub it. And then the idea being, it was like a really weird art game thing I had in my brain where it would just get worse and worse. That's not what this ends up being, but like that's the weird vision I had of the game. And I mentioned it to enough people that I was like, okay, maybe I'll just like start exploring like actually just building the social media side of this thing, where it's kind of focusing on you're someone who's deleted their all of their social media history, basically, like unfriended everyone apart from one person. It's called like Power Wash, and you can go in and friend one person a day. So you'll like have that one person you can see, you can look through who's commenting to them, and then you'd click on their replies, and they would be like, do you want to friend this person? And you could be like, yes, add as friend. But you could only do that once a day. And then so you'd log out. So yeah, they're on there now. It's like add a friend, log out, and then the day will progress, and then you can do the same thing again, but there'll be new posts because it's a new day. And the idea was the whole idea was going to run. The final thing was going to run for like 30 days, and there was going to, I think, be about like 40 to 50 people who you could friend. So you'd never friend everyone in one go. But, you know, in all of that, there were all of these. I designed it so there were like friendship clusters. So then you'd have like one person who's like on a Venn diagram they would cross, and then friending that person would mean you'd suddenly see all these other people, and it would kind of, you'd be aware of like that there were cliques and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of the idea of it. I don't like. I actually played through this morning, so that's why there's this footage that we have. But and actually, it's not as bad as I remember it being. I wrote a blog post a couple of years ago being like, I'm not working on Salt anymore. I'm in a different place. I mean, this is still true. I'm in a very different place in my life that I find it kind of hard to like identify with this very heartbroken person scrolling through social media, like doom scrolling social media, like trying to find out what happened to their ex-boyfriend. At the same time, there is some gold in there, which is more to do with like the friendships that I wrote in there that I'm like, oh, that's still really good content. I might release this demo, like I might go through and like typo check it, but then I might put it up on itch.io for people to check out if they're interested. But yeah, that was a project I worked on for probably like 6 to 8 months, I reckon, like on and off. But yeah, then the Bradwell Conspiracy came along, and I got older in that process.
And wiser.
And became less of a heartbroken mess and more of like a more like emotionally solid adult, which is good, but also means you can't really engage with that younger mindset that you had at that time. So, you know, sometimes you gotta let ideas go at the end of the day, I think. And yeah, no, that was a project that people asked me about for a long time, and I had to kind of be like, yeah, maybe I'll go back to it. And then eventually the answer just became, no, I don't think I'm going to go back to it, actually.
So one question. So these project seems to be, you know, somewhat personal, or at least, you know, you were in a different mindset when you worked on that. So the question is, did it help working on this game at the time you made it? Did he put in like maybe, you know, feelings or experiences in the game? Did it help, or was it more triggering? I don't know. Was it repairing? Or not?
I don't think it was triggering. I think it was a good way to kind of explore that stuff, but you know, because ultimately, the end of that game, given that I'm not going to make it, I can spoil it because it doesn't exist. The idea was going to be that Jane, I think, was going to be just as much of like kind of a quote like bad guy in the breakup as her partner was supposed to be, right? I think I wanted it to, because I think initially when you can make a story about like breakups and romance, it can sometimes feel like maybe there's a good guy and a bad guy or whatever. But actually, I think a lot of the time it's down to, in most normal, like healthy relationships, I'm going to say this, when it's just like things just not like working out, or like people change, or situations change, and it's not necessarily anything about those people as individuals being quote good, bad, whatever. I think people can make bad decisions, but it doesn't make them bad people. And I think that was a good way for me to kind of explore that idea of just like, you know what, sometimes things just don't work out, and then if you're on your own for a little while, to kind of just like go through the motions of just like, who am I? I'm fine. Like, not like covering up I'm fine sort of thing. I mean, the kind of like, no, I'm a good whole person just as I am, and kind of, you know, are then ready to like find new relationships. And I think I did that somewhat in my life. So that was helpful. But yeah, I think it's quite difficult to like go back to a place of like like when you're writing things like these, where it was like felt also very of like an age, right? This was kind of me writing about people who were maybe like 21, 22, that sort of age. And it's very difficult for me now to kind of think back to what I was like at that age, because that's a while ago. And yeah, I think that's it really. Just kind of going, you know what, you change, and it's okay to like leave like the past, like leave the past behind you, frankly, and just kind of go like, you know what, I made that thing. It was useful in some regard, but it also doesn't necessarily need to come out either.
I know the feeling. I've worked on a lot of projects that I think they were perfect for the moment in which I made them, and they really helped. And you know, I think that they fit very well the persona I was at the time,
Yeah.
and what I wanted to create. And now when I'm looking back, I'm like, I wouldn't have done. Maybe it's not like I'm regretting them, but it's like I wouldn't.
You're
do
just
this
a different
today.
person now.
Exactly.
You know, like I think actually what the most hilarious thing about going through this was, one, seeing how my sense of humor has changed, because I've apparently just loved anything that would reference anything else. In this game, I reference so much stuff, and like I give everything like names that are references of real life things. Whereas now I actually can't stand that in games. I hate it when like games reference real life things. It really bugs me, because now that I'm someone who's really obsessed with like world building, I'm kind of like, I want to make a new thing, and it can be like this whole other thing. It doesn't necessarily just need to be borrowing stuff from like pop culture and things like that. So now when games do that, like seem to be subtly referencing Twin Peaks, I get a bit like, or Fight Club. That was the other one that appeared for a long time. But anyway, so yeah, so there's things about it, and also just that it's very like Facebook focused, obviously, and that's just not a thing anymore. And also meme culture has like become a thing, and that's not what's in this either. So yeah, I think it's really difficult to make games that are about like the internet at the time that you like. When you make them at that time, they become, you know, aged really quickly. I think it's easier if you're going to make a game that's about technology, set it in the past just like a little bit, and then it's more like nostalgia value rather than being like current, and then just, you know, gets to that stage where it's not old enough to be cool yet, but it's you know, it's out of fashion at this point.
I think.
So have about a resurgence. I'll release it in like 10 years, and there'll be that Facebook nostalgia by then, maybe.
That could actually work really well. That could,
Yeah.
Or maybe like, you know, YouTube in 10 years, if it's still, if we all survive the coronavirus and we're all around, maybe someone will find the game on itch.io, and it was like, oh my god, this game captured the very essence.
Oh my god, it reminds me so much of my childhood when I was like on Facebook or whatever.
What Facebook was before destroying democracy. Like,
oh god, yeah, I hadn't even thought about the connotations of that.
Interesting
Lord.
to think that like the game talks about the risk of social media personally, but now we know that who cares about that?
Yeah, oh my gosh, that's the other thing that's in this that I had kind of like happily forgotten about, is that I have these like calendar cards that pop up that are like to you know, show that the days are passing, but I decided it was a really good idea to also lecture people in those by grabbing quotes from people off the internet and from articles and things saying like why social media was bad, because you know, I'm a know-it-all artsy person, and something he should tell you how you feel about things. So that's the other thing I've learned about like, one, writing, but also just like making anything, is like, do not lecture people about the thing, because they won't enjoy it, and two, it will not convince anyone in any way. I think we can all see that from Twitter anyway, but yeah, don't lecture people in your work, I would say. You can be subtle about it if you want, but like, you know, don't do what I did. I learned that the hard way.
It works, I guess.
Because I did show this at Res in, I think in 2015, maybe? I can't really remember. And yeah, I had someone come up to me after they'd played it, and they go, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to get me to like not like social media. I can't remember exactly what they said, but it was basically that. And I was like, yeah, it wasn't subtle though, so wasn't really trying to trick you into that. But now kind of like I've gone back and forth on my social media perspectives. I'm generally just like, use it, can be a useful tool, but also don't let it suck out your life and happiness if it will or wants to. Take a break, have a Kit Kat, all that stuff.
I don't think there's any happiness left in me, so good luck with sucking it out.
Oh no, don't say that. That's horrible.
So
I'm sure there's plenty. Just think about creatures and you'll be like,
oh my god, yes.
I'm okay.
I'm working on a new video, another thing that really shaped my career. So hopefully that will give you a bit of joy as well. Now,
yeah.
I know that you've been working on a lot of games, personal, big ones, professional ones. But you've also been working on something that is not necessarily a game. Do you want to talk a bit about LadyCADE?
Okay, yeah. Anything specific about it, or like what it is? I'll go into like
what it is.
So LadyCADE,
how it started.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So LadyCADE was a thing. I'm gonna say like I used to run it. I co-founded it. Used to run it. We haven't run anything for like quite a few years at this point, and ultimately, I probably don't think I'm going to, especially not now, bring that to the surface again. I think. That was created between, three of us, but then two of us mainly ran that for a while, which was me and Gemma Thompson. She now lives in, where does she live now? Stockholm. So, so she did a bunch of stuff on her own there, and she did a bunch of things like teaching young teenage girls to code and things like that, which I thought was amazing. And I was not doing any of those things. I generally, when I would run a LadyCADE event, it would be a kind of showcase event. So we did a couple of those. Some of them were also just meetups. But we were also super kind of just like, yeah, it has LadyCADE in the name, but also just kind of like anyone can show up. That's totally fine. Like it wasn't dedicated to just be like, you can only be like either like femme identifying or whatever. Like there was none of that. It was just kind of like free for all, anyone can come. So that was really cool. I enjoyed doing those, but also like as anyone can imagine who's put on events before, like that's a lot of work. And as soon as you're like in the middle of developing something, it's such a lot to kind of like also be running events. And especially if you're someone who has like anxiety about like getting on the phone to people to like book a place or whatever, that also makes it like super difficult. So I ran that for a few years, and that was mostly out of me and Gemma had met at like a game jam that was like the first like women game jam, which had the unfortunate title of the XX game jam, which it's like we weren't as like thoughtful as like I think even LadyCADE probably could do with being renamed and being generally more inclusive. We've come a long way in like whatever 10 years, but so we met at this game jam. We got on really well, and then there was obviously a bunch of like, this was before there were any other like women meetup group things really, other than Women in Games Jobs. But also they have their like big conference that they have. And at the time, we were either like still trying to get into the industry, thus had like no money, or two were juniors and had no money. So, and we were working at studios that weren't going to pay for us to go. So that was just like a thing where it's like, oh, we can't even go to this thing where lots of people then meet up and network together. So we could just put on an event that's free. Like if we do it at Loading Bar, we can get that space for free. And and, you know, maybe people will show up, maybe. And then it was like quite successful and a bunch of people did show up. And that was really nice. And we ran a couple of those around the country at different events as well. Yeah, so we did that. I now do limit break mentoring, and I've done that for the past 2 years. I have 2 mentees this time, which is really great. And yeah, it's like, I think I feel like I can be actively more helpful as a mentor than like as someone who runs events, because now loads of people have taken up doing like a similar thing. I feel like the need for me to be there is a little bit less. But also, like, I think actively mentoring someone is a way that I can like maybe I'm being helpful to less people, but I can really help those people that I do help, you know? So I feel like that's a good compromise in my life, and I feel good being able to like offer some knowledge and whatever.
Like you're doing now. Your experience.
I try. I mean, you know, you do your best.
I know it's really nice, and a lot of things you mentioned resonates with me, because I recently started making events at Goldsmith.
All right,
you know,
yeah.
One is the Games Library Nights. I know we always try to be inclusive and everything, but the problem is always getting the money. You know, because we want to have, for example, not just showcase, which I think you can sort of do for free, but if you have speakers,
Yeah.
you usually would like to pay them, especially if they at least the travel, you would like to pay them. But of course, being a very indie event run by a college, not part of an actual course, so I think completely on top, getting funding is hard. And it really limits the people you can call, where they come from. For example, we don't have the money to fly someone from America. you know, while we would love to, and maybe they would love to as well to come, we don't have the level of budget. So it limits the people who can come, how much we can pay them. So making events is complicated. It's quite complicated, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think if you actually want to run events as like in a more kind of like organized professional capacity than maybe I ever did, I think it requires you to be like really organized, but also being able to be that person who's happy to kind of knock on a bunch of doors and kind of go, hey, do you like want to sponsor this event? And I am like so not that person. I really struggle with just asking anyone to help me with anything. If I'm just like, so, you know, I feel like it needs that kind of confidence and certain amount of extroversion of being like, hey, do you want to like sponsor this event? It'd be really great for your, I don't know, company, something, whatever. Yeah, so I think that's a whole thing. And like, I don't think anyone should underestimate what it takes to put on an event, for sure. Also, even to run like a mentoring scheme, like I helped Anissa just a little bit this year, like with pairing people up. Me and a bunch of other of the mentors like went through and like split up the list of mentees, and were then like matchmaking everyone. And oh my god, it's so much work. It's so manual labor intensive. I'm absolutely shocked that Anissa did it entirely on her own last year.
And she survived.
So yeah, if you're someone who is at a company and you maybe have a budget to like that you can put towards things like this, if you're interested in supporting, you know, diversity, like encouraging diversity within games and opening opportunities for people to meet each other in like safer spaces where they feel like they're meant to be, then you should put some of your company's money into those things. Just saying, there's lots of them covering all sorts of different demographics in games, so recommend you look into it.
Please give us money.
please give people money who are setting on events, because it's tricky. And ultimately, they're just trying to make opportunities for people to meet each other and to feel connected to one another and make it feel like a community. You know, I think we actually took for granted how much, like, or at least I did, I took for granted how much I relied on like in-person events to like socialize with people, like meet people who could potentially give me work, or like might know someone who is giving work. Whereas now I'm having to like rely on the internet and like social media and stuff. Hilarious for me, the lady who made the game about hating social media. But now I'm like, oh my God, I need to figure out what my online marketing strategy is for myself. So yeah, really it's a tricky time. So, you know, give your money to those people who are doing stuff, because it's hard work and like also necessary to some degree. So I'm looking forward to when it's safe and we can all meet up again in the future one day.
Well,
it'll be nice. But for now, we have this. And this is still pretty good. This is the most I've talked to like another human being that doesn't live in my house for like a really long time.
I'm honored. But yeah, on that line, doing those live streams has been really helpful for me to sort of stay in touch with people that I knew.
Yeah, no, I bet.
And that I couldn't meet anymore. So I think, it definitely has a very social aspects to it. I hope even for the people that that are watching. Now, in the meantime, if you have any question for Holly, feel free to leave it.
Yeah, please leave a question for me. I am happy to answer basically anything.
We can try. But I have a question for you.
Okay.
So it's a question that I keep asking to all the people on the show. How many versions of Unity do you have installed on your machine?
Okay, I'm actually quite good. I think I only have about 3 on this laptop. I may have like probably about 6 on the other one, but the reason I still have those is that Bradwell was built in like, I don't know, we stopped updating after a while, so I think it's 2018 something. So that's why I still have that on my computer in case I ever want to go back in there and just, for whatever reason, I actually had to go in there and just grab a bunch of screenshots to go in my portfolio like earlier this year. So like it's been useful to have that stuff still there. Plus it's just nice to go in there occasionally and be like, oh, these scenes with all their like fully baked light maps, delightful. Because a bunch of them I think got like quite squashed down to actually be put on like various stores and stuff. So like I have the full high-res versions on my laptop, and I like to go in there and look at them occasionally. Just kidding, I don't really do that, but it is nice to go in there and know that they're there. So that's that, and then I'm building everything now in 2020. So, and I think that's actually better, right, at organizing how many versions you have with like Unity Hub and stuff.
I think Unity
Unless
Hub...
it's all just a big lie.
Well, I think Unity Hub at least makes you, like, before, having different versions was a mess. And you had to install, and there was a risk of installing one on top of each other on a different folder and messing it up. Now, I think Unity, and you didn't really know if installing 2 versions was fucking everything. Now, Unity was basically telling you, yes, you need to install multiple versions. That's an industry standard.
Whereas this one's just like, it's got a big cross through it being like, do not open this one in this version because it's not ready. Or if you are going to, it's going to change everything. Are you ready for that? And then I was like, I don't think I'm ready to open the Bradwell Conspiracy in this new thing. So I think it's going to break everything. So no, I'm still keeping my old 2018 version. Thank you.
I know some people are still using like Unity 5.6, or something like that. If you made a game prior to that, you still need to use that version. It's insane. Importing everything.
Yeah, well, I mean, they did add all of the. They changed all the way it had the packages, the stack thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, stuff changed. I mean, I think it's hilarious because like when we started the Bradwell Conspiracy was when they introduced Enlighten, and there was no documentation for how Enlighten really worked. And therefore, we didn't really know how we should make scenes. So initially, I was like, we're going to make everything really modular because that's what they do for Bethesda games. And I was like, they'll know. They're really popular and like really clever. And I'm just me. So I'm going to follow what they say. So I make like all these really modular pieces of wall, put them in. build the light maps. It takes 5 years. No, it doesn't. But
5
it felt
hours,
like
maybe.
They actually just finished baking right before the game came out. But they finish after like 2 days. We look at them. They're just like a complete mess. Like everything's got like bleed everywhere. It's just broken. And then they took our scenes, like as in George and like one of the other people who went to Unite took our scenes to Unite to be like, so why isn't this working? Like it should, like doing modular things is quite normal. Why doesn't this work? And they were like, yeah, no, it's not designed to work like that. So, okay, cool, great, good. I'm excited about that. So yes, that's when we had to like completely scrap one way we built all the levels. We ended up doing it again another time, but that was more a pipeline. That one was a particularly pipeline issue. So, but when there's not enough documentation, they've completely changed the way something works. You just kind of have to go, and you don't know any better because you're me. You go like, well, let's just try it, and we'll see what happens. And as it happened, it didn't work out, but that's fine. And sometimes that's game development.
And that's why I don't do tutorials on features that are not documented. Because one, I'm not writing documentation for free. And two, it will change. It will bloody change. Really? So all the work in a tutorial will actually, be done. And I had done that before. Yeah. I had that done before. So I've learned my lesson. People have no idea how much content I had to scrape because of that.
To just be like, oh, this isn't relevant anymore. Like just reel it in, because otherwise someone's going to look at this and be like, it doesn't work.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
And maybe it's partially my fault because maybe I take longer than necessary to make a tutorial. If I could do a tutorial a video a week like Brakis does, that would be amazing. But it takes like 3 months to make a tutorial. So unfortunately,
I think, doesn't he have like a team now?
Maybe. I hope so.
I heard him talking to someone who's like behind the camera. So I feel like there's multiple people involved in that operation.
I think
maybe I'm wrong. He was just talking to himself, but it sounded like there was. So don't feel bad.
I think it's like a couple, maybe. I don't think it's like 10. I think it's like a super small team, maybe 2 people, 3 at most. But don't quote me on that. I haven't talked with Asbjorn in a long time, so.
Yeah, but that's still like, if you think about work weeks, I had this conversation with someone like the other day, just saying like your work week, like your man hours, when you have 1 person compared to 3 people, is like, it's 3 times as big when there's 3 people. So, if something takes you longer and there's only 1 of you, this applies to game development hugely. Like, do not compare yourself to people who have multiple people working on the thing.
Yes.
I'm just saying, you're setting yourself up for failure by thinking you can keep up with everything.
Yes.
And you can't.
Totally.
Right? Because you got to have a life and you got to rest and you got to have fun too, because that's important. So yeah.
So if people want to follow you, where should they follow you?
I'm Holly Pixel on basically everything, as in pixel like the tiny dots on a screen. And that's everything. hollypixel.com is my website. If anyone is looking for a narrative designer to help freelance on their project, I am currently available to do a bit of freelance.
Your link are in the description box below, so if you want to have a look, just expand that and you can click on it. So
and I'm at Holly Pixel on Twitter as well. And that's and Instagram as well. I'm actually generally more, I don't really talk about game development stuff on there, but I post stuff on there more. So whatever works for you, whatever is your social media of choice, I'm probably there. Maybe.
Holly Pixel, you'll find
Holly Pixel, but not Holly Pixels plural, because she's actually a very popular lady who does calligraphy, and I get tagged in her post, like people who have bought her ebooks and stuff all the time, and I often have to go in there and be like, thanks for the lovely comment, but I think you're looking for Holly Pixels, who does great calligraphy and things instead. So I'm not calligraphy Holly Pixel. I'm just Holly
One
Pixel
pixel
singular, who makes video game stuff. Yes.
But so for the people watching, please stay a bit longer because I'm going to introduce the next guest and talk a bit about, a few things that hopefully you will like. But with that being said, Holly, thank you so much for being here with me tonight. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
I had such a lovely time.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, and hopefully, we'll see what you will be up to, and anytime you want to come back on the show, let me know and I will be more than happy. Thank you so much, Holly.
Bye guys, have a lovely evening.
So with that being said, I just want to spend a few minutes, well, maybe 1 minute, to introduce the guest that we're going to have next week. Is Matahagis Boric. Is a professor of creative and entertaining games at the Breda University of Applied Science in the Netherlands. He has a lot of experience with game development, and he has worked on a game that I think is pretty popular. It's called Fragments of Him, and it was a narrative story about loss and grief and all those kind of things. And I think, having talked with Ollie about narrative design, I think this is definitely something that I want to keep exploring with Mata next week. Mata was also a TEDx speaker, and he has been really vocal for queer representation in games, and Fragments of Him, in fact, it's in the story as a gay couple. So I think it will be quite an interesting chat to talk not just about the narrative and game design aspects, but also the representation one. So if you have any question about his work, feel free to leave it in the comments or send it to me, and hopefully we'll be able to address them next week, next Wednesday at 7 p.m. BST. Now, as always, with that being said, I just want to thank you, all of you, for watching, but also all the amazing people that are supporting the show. This show wouldn't be possible without the people on Patreon, and most of the stuff I work online wouldn't be possible without the support of people on Patreon. So thank you so much. And in case you're not aware of that, I release tutorials fairly regularly. It used to be once a week. Now it's not once a week anymore. Please forgive me for that. But I used to publish I published tutorial about artificial intelligence, programming, C#, Unity, shader coding, inverse kinematics, all those kind of topics around programming, specifically for usually for games. So if that's something you're interested, you might want to find, you might be able to find something interesting among over 200 tutorials that I've written in the past 4 or 5 years. So maybe have a look on my Patreon, and if you find something interesting, some of those resources are available for free. Some are not, but again, if you want to support the creator that I'm making stuff for you, it's always a good time. So with that being said, a big thank you, and I hope to see you next week as well. Bye.